Concerning the arguments for vegetarianism, it is no doubt a very controversial topic in this country, and one which has tremendous moral consequences. However, when the issue of suffering and pain is raised, we should keep in mind one fundamental question. How do we as humans feel pain? Given a purely materialistic response, and connecting to the intriguing work of Patricia Churchland in her book Neurophilosophy, and Francis Crick's The Astonishing Hypothesis, it is fairly obvious how we feel pain. We have a central nervous system which governs what our bodies will feel and how they will react. Indeed, we can modulate the amount of pain we feel by obstructing our nervous system. We do this by administering certain drugs which alter our biochemistry, as well as manipulating how our brain interprets nerve impulses. In our day-to-day world, we are quite familiar with this: laughing gas, aspirin, Prozac, ad infinitum. All of us, to greater or lesser degrees, have experienced the wide variances of pain. Thus, as human beings, we have no overriding tendency to eat other human beings. Now, when it comes to animals, we've been brought up not to empathize as much with them, especially if we've never seen them get killed for our dinner. But in certain cases, we have a resistance to eating animals, particularly if they show higher brain functions. Dolphins and apes immediately come to mind. I would hazard to guess that most people don't want to eat flipper for lunch. This resistance to eating humans and to eating certain highly evolved species, and I'm using highly here to denote complexity at the level of neural nets, I would suggest is very telling indeed. I think it is a lead we should follow up with more scrutiny. If it is true that those species with central nervous systems are much more likely to feel pain because of their sophisticated receptors and neuronal communicative powers, then it would seem easy and wise to me that we should try to avoid eating them. I don't say this because they have a soul, but because of their capacity to feel pain. Hence, we don't eat humans because we know what it's like to be human. We don't eat apes or dolphins because we think or feel that they are more akin to us via their intelligence. But my argument is this: if it is not necessary to eat things with central nervous systems in order to survive, and I'm not arguing about exceptional cases here, only those who have options, then why do we persist in eating faces? I venture to assume that most people would never eat a dog if they really knew about its sophisticated neuronal components and how it does in fact feel pain. Indeed, most of us wouldn't eat them for other cultural reasons. But I think we're not being genuinely honest to our own sense of pain and the like when we simply ignore the evolutionary complexity which underlies various animals, and in turn their respective nervous systems which modulate sensation, and say that we can eat anything since it is morally acceptable. I agree that vegetarianism is not a fact of nature. If it were, then we would not be having this relative choice discussion. For instance, we are not arguing about whether one should breathe oxygen or not. It is precisely when we have a choice that vegetarianism becomes a moral issue. We may not have an option about the fact of eating and drinking, but we most often have a choice about what kinds of foods we are going to eat. My hunch is that if we examine how our bodies evolved, we will be much more sympathetic to those things which have developed via natural selection and the like, the ability to feel pain via their central nervous systems. Then we will be much more willing through our scientific understanding, not necessarily our spiritual understanding, to let these creatures alone. Thus, the vegetarian argument can be posed in a purely materialistic perspective. Is it necessary to eat animals to survive? Or is it possible to live a life eating things which do not have a brain, and which by extension do not have the material complexity to centralize pain? I think the answer again is pretty simple: yes. Thus, the vegetarian argument does not necessarily need a spiritual injunction at all. Indeed, I find the purely materialistic perspective to be very persuasive, since it grounds our discussion in what we know about our own neuroanatomies, and what we know about the physical transmission of pain and its more sophisticated cousin, suffering. Hence, we must ask ourselves a very pertinent question. If I can live on this planet without causing severe pain to animals, then should I avoid eating such creatures? If you don't buy the argument, we're not talking about religion or spirituality here, then the question arises about a transhuman species. Imagine, if you will, that there are beings in the universe who are more intelligent than ourselves. For argument's sake, let's say that these beings, we'll call them transhumans, have a superior intelligence over us which is roughly equivalent to our intelligence over cows. These transhumans one day decide to visit our planet Earth in search of new food sources. One is reminded here, of course, of that famous Twilight Zone episode called To Serve Man. And since humans are an especially tasty delicacy, they decide to slaughter as many humans as is needed to fill their wants. Now ask yourself a question. Don't these transhumans have as much a right in killing us for food as we do in killing cows? What logic can a meat eater give to these transhumans so that he or she could avoid being killed? Let's complicate the scenario a bit, making it a bit more realistic to our relationship with cows. Imagine also that these transhumans cannot understand our speech, our language, our cries. So like our misguided human philosopher Descartes, who thought that animals did not suffer, these transhumans believe that we are stupid. Thus, instead of empathizing with our pain, these transhumans explained it away. Oh, don't worry about these creatures. They have such a low level of consciousness that they can't feel pain the way we do. Besides, remember that our divinely inspired computer programming book says that we, as transhumans, have dominion over all of the galaxies. Now, naturally, the question is how we would convince these transhumans not to eat us. To be sure, we can simply say that it is the law of nature, whatever that may mean, but that's exactly what we wouldn't do in a real case scenario. We can only hope for something fairly extraordinary. We can only hope that these transhumans would have a sophisticated understanding of neurophysiology and how pain is felt by animals. We are also animals with central nervous systems. Therefore, I am not suggesting that we are meant to be vegetarians by some law or dictate of nature. We are, it seems to me, omnivores, if we are anything. Keep in mind that there are people who have eaten bicycles and other strange things, but precisely because we can eat almost anything makes the issue of vegetarianism all the more pertinent. It is a choice. Should we make our choices on the basis of our tongue? Or should we make our choices based upon an evolving understanding of our own bodies and how such complex structures receive pain? If we opt for the former, we have no vision of anything beyond us or before us. If we opt for the latter, we can at least say that we are worthy of being called an intelligent species, animals who thought beyond their own self-interest.